What's up, guys? It's September 21st, Tuesday, I believe, and we're recording in period 1A. Last time I showed some examples of Unit 6 in the code HS, and that has functions. The one I showed was a function with parameters, meaning it has stuff in parentheses. That's not new. We've used functions with parameters like print and input and range. It's just that now we're making them. So that's what we're going to use when we look at this. Today, I'm going to start what you might do in the beginning of your project for the quiz game. Okay? So just to recap, I showed you a video of a guy making not multiple choice, but just type the answer quizzes where someone says whatever, and then it tells them yes or no, and it gives them a point. And then what he did for the next few was to just copy and paste that and change the string, change the stuff in quotes. And that works, but of course it's very big and ugly. My project for you was to take it and use a function so that you can tell how to ask a question in general and then call that up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, making it simpler and more efficient and more changeable. If you want to add another question, you can do that with one line. If you want to change how the question works, you can do that once instead of on everyone, etc., etc. So today, I'm going to do that, okay? I put it in Replit because it worked easier for sharing, and if you want to use Replit, that's great, but let's say you're going to use CodeHS, which we have been. I'm going to hit Control A to select all, and then Control C to copy. And let's go to a CodeHS sandbox, because this is probably what you'll do. You can do it on Replit, it's totally fine. And I'm going to create a guy, click Python 3, and I'm going to paste that in there. I'm going to highlight and hit Control V to paste it. And let's say we'll keep this stuff at the beginning. We might change it later, and you can change it when you make your version as a final draft. You might say something about your name or something about what the theme is. If you're doing questions about, Super Smash Brothers, you might say, hey, welcome to Super Smash Brothers quiz or something. But I'm going to take the question and put that as a function, okay? Because this chunk happens several times, and the idea is it could happen several more. So we want to say, hey, this chunk, we're going to give that a name. We're going to say this is a thing that's going to be repeated and called up in various forms where we just have to define it once. So I'm going to copy this guy, Control C, and then up here, outside of this little if block, I'm just going to put this, okay? We'll change it later and make it prettier and everything. But I'm going to say def, meaning define, which is what you always put before a function. And let's say ask question. We can call it whatever we want. To me, I always want to start with a verb. Like if I said question as a noun, it would seem like, oh, is that a variable? Is that a string? I don't know. If you put a verb in the beginning of the function, it kind of feels like it's describing better the kind of thing it is. And then in parentheses, I'm going to put some stuff. I don't know what it is yet. We'll have to decide in a minute, but there are always parentheses. And there's also always a colon, okay? So all this stuff is going to be inside the definition of what this function is, which means it needs to be bumped over. I'm going to highlight it and hit tab, okay? So now that it's bumped over, it's going to be under the umbrella of this thing. So whenever you're asking how we're going to define our function, you have some things that are the same every time, and then you have some things that are unique to each instance. For example, when you print, all the background code that we don't see, but all the code about like how to actually take that string and put it on the console and make it appear as a single line and all of that, that's the same. What changes is the stuff in quotation marks, like the actual thing that you print. Sometimes it's hello world, sometimes it's the answer is blah blah blah, and that comes from outside the function. It gets sent to it in the little parentheses here. So when you're asking a question, a lot of it's going to be the same. It's going to get an input, it's going to check versus some answer, it's going to add to the score if they get it right, it's going to say correct, otherwise not. All that stuff is basically the same. But what's different each time, what's going to be unique, what's going to need to be sent to the function from outside of it, is what the actual question is. Like sometime it's going to say what is the best programming language, and the next time it's going to say what is 2 + 8 blah blah blah, and the next time it's going to say blah blah other thing. So that's going to need to be in there. Let's say question, and then the other thing is the answer key, the correct answer, not what the user puts, but the thing behind the scenes that we're checking it against. That's also going to be different every time. Okay, that is not going to be in here because we can't put them all in here. We're trying to make the general idea of a question, not the specific thing in quotes, you know. That means that inside of here we're not going to print anything in quotes. We're just going to say question. Okay, the thing that gets sent to it, I'll put that out there, and then check it against answer. Now later we might change the names of these things, because having like ANS and answer is a little ugly, because we don't, you know, you might want to make this one called like correct answer, so that if someone was glancing at the code, they would be able to tell the difference between answer that the user put and answer that we're hiding in the background to check against, you know, that kind of thing. But the idea is we're making a function that tells you how to do this in general. It's not printing a specific word this time and checking it for a specific answer this time. It's how do you do this for all of them, which means we're not going to put stuff in quotes. We're going to put the types of things. And now we don't have to do any of this. Okay? Whenever you want to ask a question, you can just say ask question with this and this. Get that out of here. And that will say, hey, we're going to call up the function and tell it that, hey, this time the question is that, and this time the answer is that. And it's going to do all this stuff. And then we're going to do it again. I can't type today. Except this time the question is that, and this time the answer is that. I hope you can see that we're saving a lot of lines. And so, hey, we can ask question with this thing and this thing. And now I'm going to stop for a second and hit run just to show what I'm talking about. Also to test if I did it right. Who knows if I made a typo or something. but it's going to ask this and this and this using the generalized form. Well, it didn't like the indent. Let's see here. If answer lower equals correct. Oh, this thing. Whenever I did that block of like highlighting the stuff and bumping it over with tab, that often works, but it's not guaranteed. Real guides, often if you're reading like how to write proper Python, they would say don't use tab at all, just hit space 4 times and control how that works instead of hoping that the text editor is doing everything you want. Let's try now. Are you ready to play? Yes. What's the best programming language? Python. No, I didn't like that either. Aha. Guess what? We have an issue. We have a variable called score that exists both in and out of the function. Like it's in here and it's also in here. And just because we use the same word doesn't mean they automatically connect. Generally, if you make a variable in a function, it's only there in that little world. Like the question and correct answer that we have, they only exist inside this little universe. And the next time we run it, they're brand new. They're not being accessed by outside or anything else. So when we have this score variable, Python, at a first glance, would assume that we're talking about something just inside of here and not the bigger score from outside. Okay, the terms for that are pretty simple. Local is what you would call the variable inside of a function or inside of other things that we'll get to later, like a class or something. We would often have local variables inside a method of a class. The ones outside are called global variables. Okay, and there are a couple different ways to solve this, to tell the computer, hey, it's okay if we use it in here and here, or to change the way we do it so that's not an issue. One way, and this is kind of cheating, but it does work, is to just say at the top of your guy, global score, meaning, hey, there's a variable called score, and we're going to use it inside and outside of here. Okay, let's hit run to make sure that works. Would you like to play? Yes. Python, correct. Let's do a wrong one, 8, and then let's do another wrong one, Bob. And then the Stanley Cup, Knights, and then it did carry through. The score variable did work the whole way. It says we got 2 out of 4 for 50, meaning that the one inside of here and the one out here kept adding to the total up here that was used in the final calculation. Now that's kind of silly, but it does work. Question? Yeah. Now, another way, remember there are always multiple ways. There are always infinite ways to solve your problems. Another way is we could have the function just as it had stuff sent to it, like it received the question and answer key that it was going to use. You can have it send stuff back. You can have it use something called return, and then we could have inside of the function we have a little score, and then it spits out an answer, and then we would, outside of here, we would say, okay, take the score that it spit out and add it to the total score that we created at the beginning. Return is something you're going to see in Unit 6, probably the third section, if I remember right. And it's the more, I guess, robust way you'd want to do that. The global thing that I put in there is a little bit of a cheat, but it does work for now. Okay, functions and return value. You can have your function return something and send you back a response, and we could do that as well. And you could also just make another function. You could make like a score function where we tell this to ask a question, and then this sends the result to the score function, and then the score function handles it, and then at the end we ask it what the total, we can, and this is often the way it goes with bigger programs, is you just have lots of different functions doing their own little thing, bouncing back and forth with different possibilities. Right now, I'm going to go with this one just because it is easy, although it's not the finest method. And then guess what? In the fourth one, we do have an issue, which is they are looking for two possible answers. If you remember in the video on the fourth one, the guy said, hey, I want them to be able to type the name of the team or the name of the city. And now we get into interesting territory. We don't have that functionality as part of our function. It's probably not the best way to use those words next to each other. So we would have to think, do we want to add another thing about like a secondary answer? We could, because in here you do learn how to make default or optional parameters where there's like some that you don't use all the time. For example, in the range function, sometimes we put one thing, sometimes we put two or three, depending on how specific we want to get. So you could make a secondary answer where it's like, oh, if you send something else, then it'll check for that too. If not, it's fine. Or you don't have to do that. For your quiz, you can just make it so that everyone has an exact answer and you don't have to worry about that. But anyway, this is the start. If you're going to do something like this on yours, it's a very good start, and then you can ask questions by calling it up. We've already cut probably a dozen lines from the total, and by making it more efficient, we're going to be even more in that direction. If we added stuff to this, like added some extra feature, it could still be shorter than the original version, even if it's doing more for less. So I'm going to end this video now because it's going to be a bit long. And next time I'll do a follow-up where I talk about maybe having an optional second answer, or maybe doing a better way of arranging this. And then adding one other part, which is how do you handle errors if the user types the wrong kind of thing. You want to be able to tell them, hey, wait a minute, try again, instead of just letting the program crash. Thanks.